Okey, selamat pagi. Saya Ibrahim Sani mengambil alih tugasan daripada Hakim Rahman dan juga Gigi Ahmad, dan kita teruskan bersama kita coverage kita Malaysia Memilih tentang pergerakan dan juga perkembangan politik Malaysia pada pagi ini. Buat masa ini kita ada wartawan di lapangan. Kita mulakan dengan Nur Syazwani Saiful Syam yang berada di hadapan kediaman Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin. Mungkin Syazwani boleh ceritakan sedikit. Dan juga Hasimi Ahmad juga, beliau Muhammad, beliau berada di pintu 2 Istana Negara. Mungkin kita mulakan dengan Syazwani dulu. Syazwani, bolehkah Syazwani menceritakan sedikit tentang pergerakan ataupun movement di hadapan kediaman Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin?
Okey, Ibrahim Sani, terima kasih. Saya kini berada di hadapan kediaman Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin. Seperti anda saksikan, keadaan masih lagi tenang di sini. Awal pagi ini keadaan cuaca pun baik, mendung. Masih lagi belum kita lihat ada matahari yang mungkin memanaskan keadaan lagi ketika ini, sebab kita tahu rakyat ketika ini juga furious nak tahu siapa agaknya Perdana Menteri baharu yang bakal dilantik susulan daripada pertemuan Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin dan juga Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim semalam yang menghadap Yang di-Pertuan Agong Al-Sultan Abdullah Rakyatuddin Al-Mustafa Billah Shah di Istana Negara. Tetapi apa yang saya boleh ceritakan di hadapan kediaman Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin ketika ini masih lagi tenang, tiada lagi major movement. Tapi kalau kita nak recap sedikit apa yang berlaku semalam susulan daripada pertemuan Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin bersama dengan Yang di-Pertuan Agong. Selepas selesai menghadap Yang di-Pertuan Agong, Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin ada mengadakan sidang media di kediaman beliau di atas ini. Beliau ada menyatakan bahawa Perikatan Nasional sekali lagi mengulangi pendirian untuk tidak bekerjasama dengan Pakatan Harapan PH untuk membentuk sebuah kerajaan. Dan itu yang dikatakan oleh beliau dalam satu sidang media semalam selepas selesai menghadap Yang di-Pertuan Agong. Beliau menyatakan bahawa tidak ada satu pun yang mempunyai jumlah bilangan kerusi yang mencukupi. Itu berbalik kepada gabungan parti politik yang memenangi major kerusi di Parlimen pada pilihan raya umum yang ke-15. Kemudian beliau menyatakan bahawa pihaknya telah pun berbincang perkara itu sejak awal lagi, bahawa Perikatan Nasional tidak akan bekerjasama dengan PH. Itu pendirian parti sejak daripada awal sehinggalah ke hari ini. Itu yang beliau nyatakan, Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin menyatakan. Dan pada masa sama beliau menjelaskan beliau sebenarnya ada menandatangani dokumen bagi menyatakan sama ada beliau bersetuju untuk bekerjasama dengan PH ataupun tidak. Malah PAS juga bersetuju dengan perkara tersebut ketika sidang media yang turut dihadiri oleh Tan Sri Abdul Hadi Awang, Presiden PAS, dalam sidang media tersebut. Dan pada masa sama perkara ini yang kita nak jadikan perkara yang penting juga, yang mana Muhyiddin ada menjelaskan bahawa sejumlah 115 surat akuan berkanun ataupun SD telah pun diserahkan secara dalam talian kepada Istana Negara untuk membuktikan Perikatan Nasional dan juga parti-parti lain dan ahli parlimen dari parti lain. Maksudnya Muhyiddin menyatakan bahawa beliau dah ada 115 SD yang menyatakan beliau layak untuk menjadi Perdana Menteri, tetapi difahamkan SD tersebut tidak mencukupi atas sebab-sebab yang tidak diketahui. Ia susulan daripada pertemuan Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin dan juga Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim yang menghadap Yang di-Pertuan Agong. Kalau kita nak recap apa yang berlaku juga petang semalam selepas dua figura politik itu menghadap baginda di Istana Negara. Istana Negara juga mengeluarkan kenyataan bahawa masih lagi tiada seseorang pun didapati mempunyai majoriti yang mencukupi untuk dilantik sebagai Perdana Menteri. Jadi hari ini tumpuannya adalah 30 ahli Barisan Nasional yang diarahkan untuk menghadap baginda secara individu pada jam 10.30 pagi hari ini di Istana Negara. Tetapi difahamkan BN juga mengeluarkan kenyataan untuk meminta pertangguhan tersebut. Jadi ini yang kita nak jangkakan. What to expect today adalah mungkin ada perjalanan gerak masuk figura-figura politik ke kediaman Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin untuk mungkin membincangkan lagi lagi bagi membentuk sebuah kerajaan itu susulan keputusan pilihan raya umum ke-15, walaupun Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin sudah menyatakan beliau ada 115 SD, tetapi perkara itu masih lagi menjadi tanda tanya, adakah ia tidak mencukupi dan sebagainya. Jadi itu adalah antara tumpuan kami pihak media ketika ini. Ketika ini juga sudah ada beberapa media yang datang sejak awal pagi tadi, jam 8 pagi tadi, untuk membuat liputan di sini. Jadi saya kira Ibrahim Sani, pastinya kami akan terus berada di sini untuk membawakan perkembangan terkini sekiranya ada apa-apa pergerakan yang berlaku pada pagi ini.
Baik, terima kasih Nur Syazwani Saiful Syam yang berada di kediaman Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin, dan dari kediaman Tan Sri Muhyiddin kita ke pintu 2 Istana Negara. Hasimi Muhammad, silakan.
Baik, terima kasih Ibrahim di studio. Betul, kalau ikutkan saya kini berada di pintu 2 Istana Negara. Kalau semalam kita mengharapkan bahawa kita akan ada satu keputusan yang jelas untuk kita tahu siapakah Perdana Menteri ke-10, tetapi nampaknya ia bersambung lagi hari ini. Jawatan untuk Perdana Menteri ke-10 itu masih lagi kosong dan kita menunggu apakah ia akan ternoktah hari ini. Seperti mana Syazwani katakan, hari ini juga akan ada sesi menghadap 30 ahli Parlimen Barisan Nasional bersama dengan Sri Paduka Baginda, yang mana proses ini bertujuan supaya Sri Paduka Baginda dapat membuat keputusan bagi melantik seorang ahli Dewan Rakyat yang pada hemat Sri Paduka Baginda mungkin mendapat kepercayaan majoriti ahli Dewan Rakyat sebagai Perdana Menteri, kerana kita tahu rentetan daripada semalam Sri Paduka Baginda ataupun Istana Negara telah pun mengeluarkan satu kenyataan bahawa setakat semalam tiada ahli Dewan Rakyat yang dapat majoriti mudah untuk dilantik sebagai Perdana Menteri selepas pertemuan daripada pengerusi PH Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim dan juga Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin yang memukakan pengerusi Perikatan Nasional. Tetapi kita melihat kepada dakwaan yang telah pun dinyatakan oleh Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin bahawa beliau telah pun menyerahkan SD yang mencukupi angkanya 115, tetapi hari ini apakah ia akan dizahirkan, kerana kita tahu BN kekal dengan pendirian untuk tidak menyokong PH ataupun PN dan mahu menjadi pembangkang. Dan malam tadi juga Dewan Tertinggi Barisan Nasional telah pun meminta perkenan daripada Istana Negara untuk menangguhkan sesi menghadap bersama dengan Sri Paduka Baginda. Kalau kita lihat kepada permohonan ini, ikutkan ini kali kedua Barisan Nasional memohon untuk menangguhkan. Pertama, kita melihat kepada permohonan untuk menghantar SD yang mana telah pun diperkenankan oleh Istana Negara dan juga Sri Paduka Baginda. Dan malam tadi sekali lagi pihak BN memohon untuk menangguhkan sesi menghadap Sri Paduka Baginda yang mana dijadualkan secara peribadi ataupun secara bersendirian adalah bermula 10.30 pagi. Apakah permohonan kedua ini juga akan diperkenankan oleh Sri Paduka Baginda dan juga Istana Negara untuk memberi masa kepada 30 Barisan Nasional ini untuk membuat keputusan pendirian mereka yang mana untuk menyokong calon Perdana Menteri. Ini persoalan yang mungkin kita boleh timbulkan di sini, kerana kalau ikutkan 9.19 pagi, masa yang diberikan oleh Istana Negara bermula 10.30 pagi. Kita ada lebih kurang dalam sejam 15 atau sejam 10 minit saja lagi untuk masa tersebut. Apakah kenyataan daripada Istana Negara ini akan keluar sebelum 10.30 pagi, ataupun kita boleh anggap sekiranya kenyataan itu tidak keluar, ia tidak diperkenankan oleh Sri Paduka Baginda, maka 30 ahli Parlimen Barisan Nasional itu perlu akur dengan titah Sri Paduka Baginda dan hadir untuk menghadap yang di-Pertuan Agong. Itu persoalan yang mungkin kita boleh timbulkan ketika ini untuk kita menoktahkan siapakah calon Perdana Menteri ke-10 yang akan dilantik dan diperkenankan oleh Sri Paduka Baginda. Tapi kita harapkan permohonan tersebut daripada Barisan Nasional ini akan ada jawapan yang jelas daripada pihak Istana Negara, apakah ia diperkenankan ataupun ia tidak diperkenankan untuk membolehkan 30 ahli Parlimen Barisan Nasional itu akur dengan titah yang telah pun dikeluarkan oleh Istana Negara untuk mereka menghadap yang di Pertuan Agong. Kerana keputusan ketika ini adalah mereka tetap berpegang untuk tidak menyokong mana-mana PH ataupun PN. Hanya ini adalah pendirian peribadi untuk menyatakan sokongan untuk memberikan laluan kepada Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim ataupun Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin diangkat sebagai Perdana Menteri ke-10. Kalau ikutkan kepada apa yang dakwaan daripada Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin itu 115, maka inilah yang akan membuktikan apakah angka itu cukup dengan pendirian yang mungkin akan dinyatakan secara peribadi oleh 30 ahli Parlimen Barisan Nasional itu. Maka semuanya kita harapkan hari ini selesai, di mana suasana di rumah Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin di sini juga masih lagi mendung, redup. Tetapi keadaannya, bahangnya kita dapat rasai kerana sudah ramai pengamal media yang hadir untuk menantikan apakah penamatnya. Kita harapkan hari ini, dan juga kita melihat kepada anggota-anggota pihak berkuasa telah pun berada di sini untuk memastikan perjalanan proses yang mana telah pun dititahkan oleh Sri Paduka Baginda bermula 10.30 pagi ini. 30 ahli Parlimen BN perlu menghadap Yang di-Pertuan Agong. Persoalannya, apakah permohonan itu berjaya ditangguhkan ataupun mereka perlu akur untuk hadir menghadap dan menyatakan pendirian mereka untuk menyokong calon Perdana Menteri ke-10 Ibrahim.
Terima kasih Hasimi Muhammad. So there you have it. Some of our reporters on the ground. Nur Shazwani is at the residences of Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin as well as Hasimi Muhammad and Hilmi Malik and many other reporters that are on the ground right now trying to observe some of the movements that we see from the landscape or political landscape right now. So just to recap, caretaker Prime Minister Datuk Sri Ismail Sabri Yaakob said that the government or caretaker government under his leadership or to be called the caretaker cabinet will continue to function on top of the movements of the political movements that we see today, yesterday and the day before that. To quote Datuk Sri Ismail Sabri, he says that the rakyat must not be confused as if there is no government because the former government is still there and it remains to be the caretaker government. Datuk Sri Ismail said that a special parliamentary session would be held to table a budget so as to pay the salary of civil servants before the 31st of December this year, if a new government has not yet been formed. On top of that, as per recapped by my colleagues on the ground or in the field right now, Barisan Nasional, whose numbers in the Dewan Rakyat is sought for the formation of the simple majority of the federal government, will see the entire 30 members of its Member of Parliament to meet the Yang di-Pertuan Agong or the King. And he will meet, the King will meet these MPs individually after his meeting with the two largest political blocs, Pakatan Harapan, i.e. the leader of PH, Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim, and Perikatan Nasional and the leader of its bloc, which is Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin, yesterday on the 22nd of November. That meeting ended with no result as to who is to be appointed as the Prime Minister to form the government. The meeting with the 30 BN MPs this morning has been set by Istana Negara to be set to take place at 10:30 a.m. onwards. However, the coalition is said to be seeking another postponement from the palace following its Supreme Council meeting last night. Now, earlier, there was a suggestion by the King for the two coalitions to form a unity government that had been rejected by Perikatan Nasional, as stated by Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin, the chairman of Perikatan Nasional. So joining us in the studio right now are two very illustrious guests, Bridget Walsh, the Honorary Research Fellow and Political Analyst here in Malaysia at the University of Nottingham, and to her right is Dato' David Gurupatham, the Industries Unite co-founder. Thank you for joining us this morning. As you can see, there's a lot that needs to be covered this morning. Maybe we can start with Dato'. The impact towards some of the industries, particularly the small and medium-sized enterprises, is actually quite crucial for us to look at. Let's be honest here, none of us have been working for the past 2 days. It's the third day of work day. But at the same time, we need to be productive in order for us to actually earn a living, put some food on the table. How is this political quagmire impacting businesses right now, Dato'?
I think businesses react to major issues, have two major issues. One is, of course, naturally confidence in the market. And number two is of course, some form of stability or, or stability, all right? Now, in a situation such as we are in today, you find that there's a lot of confusion as to what's going to happen, a lot of uncertainty as to what is going to happen, and also there's a trickle-down effect. So if you look at where the stock market has been over the last couple of days, lost 7 billion or so of its value, and the ringgit has dropped about 1.5% in just a couple of days, that shows a lack of confidence in the international market, which then trickles down into our markets. So for businesses, this has a very serious impact because it affects their planning, it affects what they're going to do. They have to, of course, take into account interest rates, to drop in the value of the ringgit in terms of their borrowings. And so what the outcome of this election has very significant impact on business.
Bridget, do you agree with the statements that Dato' shared this morning?
I think I do agree and disagree. I agree in that I think that it's no question we've seen a big shock factor to the business community, and it's been a negative one. But I would also say that I think that this is uncharted territory for Malaysia in the context, and so there's been a bit of overreaction to the circumstances because I think that generally we're in a situation where these things are happening at the elite level. Most of the economy issues are happening as normal, right? There's not that much difference on economic policy among the different actors. And social policy, yes, but in economic policy, no. So I think there has been somewhat of an overreaction. These things take time. It's only been a few days. And I think that, you know, sometimes it can take a long time. I think there's a lot of pressure to move it forward very early and to solve the situation.
You know, many of us did expect a hung parliament. Many of us also expected some form of horse trading to happen, but it's been 3 work days now with no end in sight, let's be honest here. Do you feel that this whole half expectation of a hung parliament but no PM to be decided after 3 days is actually something that is expected by the markets, or do you feel that this is actually quite seen by many of the business leaders? Maybe Dato'?
Well, I think as far as the business leaders are concerned, you know, most of them are neutral in terms of politics. They're neutral. All they want to do is do business. You know, they have employees to take care of. They've got, you know, their own business interests to push forward. And as far as business is concerned, I mean, if you look at the 1980s, for example, you know, Barisan Nasional won in a landslide, and that was because the economy was doing very well. You know, so using that as a yardstick, at the end of the day, for business, it's a thriving economy and a politically stable government that we need. Now, if you look at the last 10 years, you know, it's not a coincidence that we've not had that kind of strength in terms of a very strong and stable position in government. And, you know, that's translated in the way our economy has also reacted, you know. And I think as far as the business community is concerned, yes, it was expected that it was going to be a hung parliament, but everybody is hoping, I mean, I'm looking at all the WhatsApp messages that I'm getting, that we can have this issue resolved ASAP and move on. I think that's really what the business community wants. They want to move on. You know? And
that's exactly what the King said as well. We need to move on. However, we can't. That's the quagmire that we're facing in. A suggestion has come in from Tian Chua, the defeated candidate at Batu and former Vice President of PKR. If we can just show his tweet. He argues that we should respect BN and GPS's neutrality, we should leave them aside and to look at some of the possibilities that we can form. With PH block, with the 3 coming in from Warisan and 1 from Julau MP Larry Seng, that comes up to 86, and GRSs and KDM plus 2 independents along with the 73 of Perikatan Nasional, that comes to 82. Neither one has 112, so by convention the larger block gets the first bite of the cherry. He also further argues that Anwar gets the first move, offers Muhyiddin a proposal. Muhyiddin then returns with a counter, and from the 2 proposals we can build the common ground and try to negotiate for some mid-path here. And leaders must be sincere and willing to compromise. He argues that the 2 blocs must recognize each other's strength and best options for a national unity government. So this is a suggestion. Now, we've heard something to this effect yesterday, Bridget, that the King wanted some form of unity government, but it was flatly rejected by Tan Sri Muhyiddin. Where does the issue lie right now? Is it the reluctance of Perikatan Nasional to form a government, any form of government, unity or otherwise, that is the one that is putting a handbrake to all of this? Or are these kind of solutions just not practical to appeal to their respective bases?
I think it's mostly the latter. You know, we have real ideological differences between PN and PH, and I think it's difficult to be able to accommodate the base reaction to these type of cooperation. I think also, you know, the personality relationships between the two men, and also if we add in Hariawang, we have and Anwar, they're very sour, and I think that you know, you have to have trust and you have to have respectful conversations. I think it's going to take a bit of time for some of the emotions of the campaign to be able to reduce. And I think that right now, a PN-PH government is not really palatable to both sides. Okay,
so this is the problem, and we're trying to face what the solutions are. There's still 3 more work days, including today, left for this week. Let's do a quick recap. The FBM KLCI is down 1 point, or negative 0.07% to 1,440. 450,000 shares done, 200 million shares done. Losers and gainers about the same, little to no movement on the FBM KLCI. This is a wait and see of the highest order, if you ask me. And this is just the listed companies. And then, of course, the smaller companies and the mid-sized companies, as Dato' were alluding to, they really are agnostic towards the whole political machinations that is happening right now. But we need to move on. We need to have some form of government in place. As we heard just now from the caretaker Prime Minister, there is a government, a caretaker government, but nobody seems to realize the legitimacy or the ability for them to actually conduct business or the affairs of the people. Dato', do you feel that some form of solution is needed in order for us to move ahead and try to be more productive?
Certainly, I mean, you know, but it starts with the decision that the Yang di-Pertuan Agong is going to make. And I mean, needless to say, there'll be a lot of questions about it. But coming back to what you were saying, in terms of the selection process and so on and so forth, and the parties, now, that's just one component. Now, it has to be tested in Parliament, you know. So it's a very serious issue because it just doesn't stop there. Now, what happens when it goes to Parliament? Is there going to be a vote of no confidence, for example? So there are a lot of issues, as what Bridget alluded to, that, you know, these parties must not just come together, but they must find a mechanism in which they are going to work together when they're diversely opposed to each other's policies.
Yeah, it's amazing.
You know, because otherwise you end up in Parliament and then there's a vote of no confidence, and then we come back to this situation we're in today again.
I see that, my personal view is that the solution lies with a minority government at this juncture. And countries in the world have had minority governments. I think that, but a minority government with a CSA, which is a confidence supply agreement, with either potentially BN or GPS offering a period of time for the coalition that has had the most block, which I think, as Tin Chua has pointed out, is Pakatan Harapan and Warasan and others at 86. But a CSA with the largest group for a period of time. That time, you know, UMNO needs to resolve its internal problems because they have divisions among themselves. They need a bit of breather from the process, even though I understand that they're also going to present their own candidate in this process. But my sense is that, you know, the vote has been a rejection of UMNO from both sides. So I think that in this context, it would be very difficult for an UMNO BN to be offering a candidate. So GPS, who has largely talked about stability, you know, can offer stability to the nation by providing a CSA agreement for a period of time. I'm not talking about 5 years, because I think this is not realistic, but maybe a year in that context to the end of next year would provide us a proper opportunity for a budget to be passed. You know, the country is facing a very serious economic situation from the perspective of a recession that allows an issue of stabilization. But GPS involvement in terms of allowing this stability to move forward, I think it would be a step for the nation.
Maybe, Bridget, you can explain to us why the neutrality stance now. It seems like there seems to be a change of position. GPS initially said that they are willing to form a government along with BN and PN, but the position now is that, you know, we leave it to the king to decide. Is this because of the pushback that we've seen from some groups, including some Christian groups in Sarawak?
63% of Sarawak is Christian. in terms of the numbers of the demographics. You know, I think that the decision to work with, by Abang Johari, to work with Premier, to work with PN, was not done in a consultative way with all the different coalition partners. And there's been a lot, so this has been a problem with all of the coalition partners across the spectrum. They're doing negotiations without buy-in from different actors. But there was, and then it was done quickly, and also there has been a lot of resistance on the ground from churches, from business organizations, because they're concerned about working with PN, particularly, not so much Bersatu, but particularly working with PAS. And those have been particular issues that have been raised. And I think the move towards a neutral position is a way to ameliorate some of the pushback, but also to a recognition that what GPS has long been pushing for is what they want to be in the government or support with the government, and they want to articulate an issue of stability. The path forward, I personally believe, is the CSA agreement. What that means, they're not necessarily part of the government, but they're still promoting an issue of stability. And keep in mind, Malaysia has a history of this. The Ismail Sabri's government was stable for a period of time because of a memorandum of understanding for the opposition. And so I think that you know, these precedents have been put in place that can provide a period of time for Malaysia to actually deal with the bigger economic issues that the country is facing.
Industries Unite represent over 100 trade unions and, of course, trade associations and chambers of commerce. How has the reaction been from them following these political machinations right now, Dato'?
I think, judging from the conversations that are going on in our various groups, you know, everyone's concerned, certainly concerned. You know, their concerns range from business to also on the social side. You know, people are worried about, you know, the fact that our country is so fractured, you know, whether you want to talk about religion, whether you want to talk about race and things like that, right? And all of this has impact on business, right? And also, you know, what I've seen is a lot of things that have been shared on social media, you know, like TikTok and all these other social media postings that can be quite inflammatory, you know, and that's also moving up into the business sort of chat groups and things like that, you know. So overall, what we found recently is a kind of uncertainty, you know, and uncertainty in moving forward. So at the end of the day, most of them, they want a stable government. They want a pro-business government, naturally, you know. They want a government that is going to come out and say, okay, these are our policies going forward over the next 5 years or so, you know, in terms of business. And without that, that instability leads to a lack of confidence. And that's really translating down into the lower SMEs and micro SMEs.
And so I'll hang on to that, Dato', because of the clean sweep that Perikatan Nasional has made in 3 states and the big gains that they have made in other states, including in Selangor, that whole idea of a pro-business government, do you think that doesn't sit well with Perikatan Nasional? Do you feel that the business leaders don't see them as pro-business?
I think judging from the last 20-odd months, business leaders have felt that things could have been done better. You know, you look at the budget, you look at the policies that they have come forward.
How MCO was conducted.
Correct.
I've been following Industries Unite.
Yes, you know.
How you guys have been calling for a different way of doing things in the MCO.
You know, and we've been calling for a lot of engagement with industry. You know, we've been calling for a lot of engagement with the business community before they come up with policies, you know, so that they have an understanding. Now, what we found out, or rather what came out during the MCO, was the bureaucracy versus the reality. Now, a lot of these people were never in business before who were making decisions for the business community, and that came to the fore when we had MCO, you know, because there was a lack of understanding of what was going on the ground. And it was only when we could sit down with the different ministries and talk about, you know, things like opening up the businesses, the SOPs, having a system moving forward, getting some of these industries out, checks and balances. It was only after we were able to do that did we see a real move forward towards actually, you know, recovering, you know, from the MCO situation that we were in. And So what we're looking for really is a situation where we have, as I say, government prihatin, a government that is going to be concerned about the business community, that is going to engage with the business community, and together with that, an idea of where we're heading over the next few years. What is the direction? What is the our economic direction? That's very important.
Bridget.
I just add a few things. I think that it's not just about being pro-business. I think that the vote was very much about also the vulnerabilities that ordinary people are facing. And so I think the social safety net needs to be strengthened. And I think one of the reasons why PN was successful is that they were seen as protecting communities during COVID, and as a result, they continue to support them. That's part of the reason why Muhyiddin is still quite popular as a figure in the country. I would also say that, I think this is an opportunity, and I know that you're hearing a lot of negativity, but this is an opportunity to make in a coalition, if it is a more unified coalition as opposed to one side, to deal with some of the real serious issues that Malaysia has to face, which is where's the money going to come from? There needs to be revenue issues that have to be addressed, right? Mm-hmm. And there also needs to be a social safety net. So there can be, part of these conversations in the larger discussions of Hung Parliament move away from personalities and positions and interests to concerns about common policy platforms. And, as we are hearing these conversations happening right now, this is a time to start to say, hey, wait a minute, a new government that would come in, all right, will be based on a compromise that does this type of programs that are pro-business, social safety net strengthened, and also has some sort of compromise on issues of revenue, because there has to be somewhere to pay for this. We're not there yet. Okay, let's be realistic. We're not there yet. But I put this out on the table because I think this is an important direction. The sad thing, however, is PN has this is part of what's going on in the markets. There's a lot of uncertainty because they don't know how they're going to govern and manage the economy. And I would be fair to say that of the 3 different states that PAS has governed, we've had a relatively successful example in Terengganu, and I think that is important to highlight. But of course, Kelantan has not been seen as successful, and Kedah has had mixed performances, especially some of the reactions of some of the industries there. So we have, I think that PN what has not shown and provided confidence to the marketplace or to Malaysians that they know how to manage the economy. And in fairness, PH could also step up its game in raising these sets of issues as well.
You see, Bridget, just to recap, when we talk about popular vote that was cast in the name of PHPN and BN, PN and BN, who canvasses most of their votes from the Malays, have garnered about 52% of the popular vote, or about 8.1 million. That's a sizable number, right? And when we talk about Pakatan Harapan being the largest winner, I suppose, with 82 seats won, about 37% is cast in their name, 5.8 million. So, 8-point-something million, 8.1 million for PN and BN, which are mostly Malays, and 5.8 million generally covering a lot of the other races. There is still relevance in terms of trying to get more voices of how PN is trying to address the Malay pains, as Bridget was alluding to earlier. This is the part where it's very hard for us to understand, in the sense, is there 2 sides of the Peninsular Malaysia right now? Where do we see businesses trying to understand the pains, the social coverages that needs to be done, particularly how, generally speaking, the Malays are trying to get back on their feet after the MCO. David, do you feel that is the situation right now, that businesses are generally unaware of the situations that is impacting Malays in general, and therefore this is how the votes are being translated right now at the ballot box?
No, I think quite the contrary. I think businesses understand the issues. I mean, if you took the MCO as an example, businesses were very happy that the government was actually, giving all these programs where they were dishing cash out and money, incentives, grants, and all this help that was given down to the grassroots. They were quite happy because at the end of the day, it solved one problem, but it was also giving liquidity to the market, So I think business is very sensitive to these issues as well, But at the end of the day, it is still a dollar and cent game, You know, efficiency is very important in business. You know, it's not a social, you know, unlike the government, you know, as far as business is concerned, it's how efficient you are, what your return is. And then that's also very important, because then it's the income that you generate out of these things that then go on to the treasury that pays for, through taxes, you know, that pays for everything else. Okay. Have you looked at?
Dato', hold on to your thoughts. So what we're seeing right now, some of the visuals that is currently happening from the palace gates, door 2 to be specific, that is some of the key highlights that we can bring to you right now. Some vehicles are moving in. It doesn't seem like Barisan Nasional is getting the extension of meeting the king, which we saw them making the call late last evening. They wanted to postpone the 10:30 a.m. Meeting. However, it doesn't seem like you know, 1 or 2 individuals are coming in. There's a whole string of cars, which could, we don't have any confirmation yet, but perhaps this would resemble some of the MPs coming into the palace. And of course, it could be just general public vehicles moving in, but that just generally a lot of movements at the palace right now. So while we get more confirmation on what's happening in the in front of the palace gates, Dato', please go on with your statement just now in terms of how businesses are trying to still address, or at least be aware and cognizant of the issues that is currently happening to the rest of Malaysia right now.
Yes, but also if you look at how what we are, Industries Unite, we have a very large group of associations that are Malay. You know, we have the Bumi Putra Retail Association and so on and so forth. And at the end of the day, you find that they all have the same concerns. So it's not necessarily racial in that sense. You know what I mean? Everybody has the same concerns when it comes to business. You talk to Amir Maidin, who's been on the show many times as well.
That's right.
You know, and you know, that's retail for you, Bumi Putra Retail, right? So at the end of the day, when at the bottom line, it's about business.
All right, Bridget?
Just 3 points. First of all, I think, as been mentioned earlier, the social fabric is being strained because of some of the hate speech that we've seen across the different political parties.
It's been increasing and perhaps continue to increase.
And this is creating a lot of tensions and anxiety among ordinary Malaysians from all different spectrums of the.
Yes.
And I think this is something that you know, it reminds people of the past, and it is I think you know, it is something that needs attention and to be addressed. Number 2, I think we also, if we look at the issues of vulnerabilities, I would say it's not just about the Malay community. We're talking about large sections of all communities of Malaysia are facing very difficult times, and small businesses also have not recovered fully from COVID and the decline of the economy. So I think that, you know, this is where there needs to be a comprehensive policy programs that, because as Dato' said, I do agree with him that it is necessary, that it's in the interest of business to have citizens that are not facing these very dire economic circumstances. Addressing those vulnerabilities through a cash transfer program is actually a short-term measure. There needs
Absolutely.
to be more of a long-term type of discussions of what these sets of issues are. And I think that that's good for business, it's good for Malaysia in that context.
You know, while we try to you know, grapple who's going to be the Prime Minister, they still need to answer 3 big questions: inflation, wages,
Absolutely.
and global recession.
Yes.
And to some degree, many of the politicians are addressing this in one shape or form or another. However, it doesn't seem clear, at least to me as a voter, for instance, where is the solution going to come? How is the budget going to be funded? Where is the policy in terms of increasing our wages? How are we going to upskill and reskill our workers in a post-pandemic world? These questions, trust me, all Malaysians are asking in one shape or form or another. Do you feel that, you know, while, you know, we try to understand who's going to be the next Prime Minister, I think that has to be the main conversation of the day. Maybe Bridget?
No, I agree. I mean, 100% is that's what I was talking about earlier. This is an opportunity to start those conversations. The political campaign didn't have those conversations. They had a bit of manifesto here, a bit of manifesto there, but nothing that was actually meaningfully talking about how Malaysia is going to move forward. And keep in mind that the global indicators are not good, right? So, you know, the assumption was that Malaysia would just continue to kind of have gradual growth and move, but in fact, that's not what the situation looks globally. There needs to be more concrete initiatives among all sides. And, you know, I don't see any of the coalitions really talking about these issues.
We have about 5 or 6 minutes left.
I completely agree with Bridget on this. You know, I think that was lacking, you know, for the business community, absolutely lacking in any of the manifestos, right? And Bridget is right. We're facing tremendous challenges. I think if you look at Europe, it's in recession already. The US has a very serious problem with the economy right now. You know, China is still in lockdown, technically. So Malaysia, we're right smack in the center of a possible tsunami that is coming, economic tsunami. Are we prepared for that? You know, and what are the policies moving forward? We also have a very serious issue with the declining ringgit. You know, don't forget there are a lot of overseas loans. I mean, the government is not so much in debt, but we have an external debt that we have to deal with. You know, trade deficits that we have to tackle. And don't forget, we also have a big chunk of bureaucracy that gets paid for out of taxes, you know. So all these issues have to be tackled before we can decide, or we can say, you know, our salaries are going to rise or the economy is going to do better. You know, these are fundamental issues that have to be dealt with, or somebody must come up with an idea or a plan on how they're going to tackle this.
Industries Unite, do you feel that you are willing and able to work with all stakeholders involved, whoever comes into government, or is there a preference over one type of government instead of the other?
No, I think as far as Industries Unite are concerned, we'll work with the government of the day. That's been our position from day one, before the various issues, the various reshuffling of prime ministers and so on and so forth. We've been consistent, and we say we respect the government of the day, we respect the constitution, and we will work with whoever's in charge.
Okay, again, just to recap, some visuals are coming in from the palace right now. Very shortly, I'm going to pass over the debate baton over to my colleague Najib Arif, but generally speaking, this is the kind of visuals that we're seeing. Just to recap, 10:30 a.m. is the time where the King has sought for the audience of all 30 Barisan Nasional MPs. We are going to have 2 or 3 reporters at the various gates at the National Palace, so do stay on with us. In the meantime, David, I just want to show you the ringgit graph. Maybe you can show the audience the ringgit graph. This is what Dato' David was talking about, that the ringgit graph is actually quite, you know, scary to look at when we look at the ringgit weakening. Yes, it has been strengthening over the past few weeks, but, you know, it's creeping up yet again. And that whole notion of where we are at, the quagmire that we're facing right now, a lot of our imports are going to be very expensive, and because of this, some of the materials that is going to cost is going to increase. So when people say, oh, you know, don't worry, when you sell it outside of Malaysia, you're going to get so much money, it doesn't necessarily work in that linear kind of thinking, because cost is actually increasing. So that is the reduction of competitiveness, or at least the productivity competitiveness of Malaysians trying to make money abroad. It's not that easy. So it's not going to be a very direct kind of conversation. To be frank, I don't know why anyone wants to be Prime Minister right now. It's not that easy of a job, honestly.
Yes.
Right?
But you're right. What I want to add to that, what you're saying is you're absolutely right. Because if you look at the economy, 70% is run by SMEs. And what's the biggest issue for SMEs today? The cost of doing business. You know, the cost of doing business, when you talk about the raw materials and so on and so forth, is untenable at the moment. You know, it's a big pressure on them. You know, they've just come out of an MCO, they've got all these loans, debts and all of that to repay. The ringgit is low, the cost of doing business, cost of everything has gone up. And if we don't get these SMEs going, you know, you're talking about 70% of this economy, you know, it might bottom out. You know, so we need, but the governments have always understood that. And that's why you've always seen a lot of support for the SMEs and the micro SMEs, because you got to stabilize the bottom before the top, you know, can function and trickle down as well. So a lot of attention has to be paid to this segment of the market, and hopefully, you know, they will do things like shoring up the currency, because as you say, you know, look, this is the levels we're at.
Let's pull up the
here.
currency graph again.
The levels we're at here are the levels of the economic crisis when, do you remember Tun Mahathir had to peg the currency?
I very much remember that.
You know, and what happens is, look at what happens really is the value of our assets. The country's assets just dropped by 50%. You know, we're worth 50% of what we were a few years ago. You know, and just by the devaluation of the ringgit. So
Bridget, you wanted to add something?
I just said, I think that, you know, there's a lot of pressure that's happening to create solutions, but it is very important that this political stalemate does not evolve into more of an economic crisis and to exacerbate the negative economic conditions. I think that, you know,
It's unviable that you think we're not yet in an economic crisis, Bridget.
Well,
I mean...
I do, but I didn't want to use that word in the context of the dynamics. I do recognize that there is a very serious crisis dimensions of happening here. But I do think one has to be careful of one's language in this area.
Okay.
I do feel that, you know, it's only been a few days, and Malaysia has, you know, hung parliament's issues take time, so that the markets need to give Malaysia's leaders a bit of time to resolve these issues before overreacting. At the same time, there are very serious issues that have to be attended to.
Final word, maybe,
well,
David?
I agree with Bridget. I mean, Malaysia is still very stable as a country. You know, economically, we're still there. We still can get out of it. Businesses are pretty confident that we can. All we're saying is we need firm leadership. We need a solid base. We need a clear direction to move forward. You know, and we'll thrive. I mean.
We need inclusive leadership also, that makes sure that it includes different spectrums.
Absolutely, I agree, yes.
Fantastic. Thank you both, Bridget as well as David. I think we can pause for now in terms of the conversation. But just to do a quick recap, that was Datuk David Gurupatham, Industries Unite co-founder, as well as Bridget Welsh. Bridget, I got your name right this time round, the Honorary Research Fellow at University of Nottingham, Malaysia. Just to do a quick recap, as of 9 a.m., the benchmark FTSE Malaysia, KLCI eased about 5.18 points to 1,436 points. It's now 9:58 a.m. We're looking at the FBM KLCI shedding about 2 points, or 1.5 points, pardon me, to 1,439 pounds. I guess this is about the same. The market bellwether opened 9.39 points weaker at 1,431. Trading is low. It's low. 670 million shares done, about 300 million ringgit valued. Gainers outweighing losers at 254 gainers and 238 counters in the red. Now, of course, we can toss it back to some of the visuals that we have right now in front of the palace, as we can see some of the cars that is coming in, moving in. These are just general the traffic, but we saw some cars being let in by the cops. Our reporter Hasimi, as well as Hilmi Malik, is there on the ground. We also have some of the reporters, including Nur Shazwani, Saiful Sham, at the residences of Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin, just keeping a tab and keeping an eye on the movements there. So we're going to be ensuring that you are going to be kept abreast in terms of all the developments that's currently happening in Malaysia, particularly in terms of the movements of the movers and shakers in the political sphere. For now, we'll go on a short break. Coming back is our colleague, Najib Aruf. We'll be right back after this.